All right, this feels like an extreme close-up, but it's just gonna have to work for now. I hope you can hear me enough. I'm gonna go edit this in InShot before I load it up to YouTube, so I'll be able to adjust the volume and maybe work on the audio a little. My cooler pump, in case you live somewhere where you don't have swamp coolers and you only have air conditioning. It's an evaporative cooler, so it's on my roof and it's really big and loud and has this very loud fan that blows. But there's also a pump that takes water and gets the pads wet. And when the pump isn't putting water on it, it's basically just a big thing that blows hot air in your house. So, and why don't you fix it, you might ask? Besides the fact that I have other things to spend $100 on, my cooler, like I'm only going to need it for maybe another month. Occasionally it's hot into the first or second week in October, but I'm not really feeling like that's what I'm looking at. So I am trying to make it through this last little bit of the season without that, because I have to get a whole new unit in the spring, because my wonderful baby daddy was really bad at home repair, only told me how stupid I was, and that no, he's really good at home repair, for like 20 years of our marriage. And anyway, to this unit that I replaced 5 years ago that should have lasted a decade or possibly 15 years is ready to rust its way out of the ceiling and fall through the hole in the roof. So this is going to be like a little bit of a girlfriend chat, only by myself, meaning that I'm sitting here brushing my hair. I might smoke a little. I'm going to tell you the story of the hurricane grid work. Depending on how old you are, you could be thinking, let me tell you a little story about a man named Jed, which is kind of funny because my ex-brother-in-law's name is Jade. That should have been my first clue. But at any rate, I joke. This is all jokes. Well, the part about him being shitty at home repair, not a joke. So anyway, that's why I'm not fixing the swamp cooler. Why do you care about any of that, do you ask? And the reason for that is that it's hot, so hot, and I do not have the heat tolerance that I used to, and it, I turn into, I don't know, a sloth. I think sloths might have more energy above 80 degrees than I do. Maybe not 80. Like, I'm good up to about 80, and then once it starts climbing up to 85 or so, then I just can't deal anymore, and all I can do is lay here semi-naked under a ceiling fan. So I did that and thankfully fell asleep for a little while. And now that the sun's gone down, I can pump cool air back in the house, because when I woke up, the air outside was cooler than the air inside, since I had to have the window shut. So, to keep it cool in here during the worst of the day. So that's why it's a little noisy, because there's all these different fans going, and I need them. I cannot do without them right now. So thank you for your patience with all the ways in which I will be an imperfect being, as I said on my audio that I left for you guys. So, Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida and the tale of the grid work. Like most stories, like, you think the beginning is the beginning, but the beginning is actually much earlier in most stories than from where the story seems like it should start. So we'll be going over a lot of this in the grid worker meetings, which will be on Monday nights. I think I said 7 p.m. Mountain. And those will be recorded, so don't worry about that if you can't get there in person every time. But I do want you there because I want us to learn and grow and figure this stuff out together. And I will be, taking your input and answering your questions and working with you. So for this story, I've always had a sensitivity and a relationship to weather and the earth, earthquakes, all of those kinds of things. It was really hard. It's kind of funny now that I'm saying it out loud. So I was born in Florida, where I got the experience. God, holy shit. This is going to be one of those holy shit moments, probably through the whole video, where I keep saying holy shit a lot because I'm having these realizations as I'm talking out loud and putting all of it together, because I have a tendency, and I think it's my Taurusness, where, I'm just like the bull and I'm charging through, and then I get done running and I go, oh look, oh, there was this chain of events that all made sense once I got to this point. Wow. Yeah, it all made sense. So, born in Florida, so I had the experience until I was almost 6 of being in hurricanes there, and had up close and personal experience with that, and also knowing how to deal with the aftermath and deal with power outages, all of those kinds of things. Then we moved to California, and we have storms in California, but I was in Northern California, and it's much colder. It tends to be like, rather than a hurricane like the tropical storms, this will be like heavy rains, cold, lots of mudslides, that kind of thing. I also experienced Mount St. Helens as a kid. So looking back on it now, it's kind of blowing my mind a little. I might even cry at some point, because I've never thought about how far back this actually went. I mean, in reality, it's infinite, and my time on Earth goes back a good 60,000 years or so, but in linear time. But I didn't realize how much my life prepared me for all of this stuff right now that we're going to be dealing with, the extreme weather events, the shifts in the earth and in the human collective consciousness, and wow. So when I grew up in California, I was like, I always knew when there was going to be an earthquake. I could feel it coming. Sometimes I would feel anxious. Usually I just had a headache, and it was kind of like, the worse the headache, the bigger the earthquake. And it would feel like I was a barometer almost, or a seismograph, where I could feel the pressure building up in the fault lines, which, if you're if you know anything about California, especially Northern California, the fault line, the biggest fault line there, that's causes the most trouble, and that they always worry about causing the big one, is the San Andreas fault line. So after the field trip in 4th grade to the San Andreas fault, guess what they said to me for a long time afterwards? It's Andreas' fault. So or if there was an earthquake, then they would tell me that, wouldn't that be funny if I'm not Nemesis, a planetary goddess, I'm a fault line. That's kind of funny. So I grew up in that area and getting more sensitive to all those things, and then started having prophetic dreams. At least that's what I thought they were. Now I don't see them quite that way anymore. And I'll get to that a little further in the story. But at the time, I still thought they were prophetic dreams. But I started having dreams that happened. And usually it was about big things. It would be a loved one was going to be in danger. It made my stomach flip thinking about that just now. I dreamt about 9/11 before it happened, only I didn't really understand what it meant, because my awake mind, my waking thoughts, I could not conceive of anything other than an earthquake doing what the aftermath looked like in the dream. And um, in the dream, I was, and I thought I was in the San Francisco Bay Area because my friend used to live there, and we came from there. So I thought I was having a dream about a really big earthquake in California and that I was going to look for her. And then about 6 months later, 9/11 happened. And before 9/11 happened, I had actually gone for my first trip to New York City and had, we were going to go to the World Trade Center. I was going to go up in it, and we were across the street from it. And it wasn't even like I was scared, because I was asking myself, like, what's your problem? You went up in the Empire State Building. You're obviously not afraid of the height. You've been in lots of tall buildings, and it was like I just had such an overwhelming feeling of dread and sorrow and everything. So then when 9/11 happened, I went a little crazy, honestly, for a little while. Not crazy, but just like I I came home and drank every night, which was not a normal habit for me. I chain smoked and drank every night after work and watched news on a constant loop for like 30 days because I was I was angry and I didn't understand. I didn't understand at the time why why bother showing me this dream. And it was experiences like this that I think at least felt like it delayed some of my progress with things. But as I'm talking now, I can see where, as usual, everything kind of unfolded the way it was meant to, I guess. But at the time, I was really pissed. I was pissed at, my guardian angels, my guides, my whatever made me have these precognitive dreams. Because my thought about it was, what the fuck good does this do me? 5,000 people still died. Now we're at war with some other country. And that was such a shocking thing at the time for adults because we had not had that kind of, we just never faced anything like that before. Pearl Harbor was the closest thing to an attack on American soil, which was horrible, but it was very far away. It wasn't on the mainland, and there was something about that was just so earth-shattering. So anyway, I'm getting off track a little bit. That started happening. And so I came to understand, especially after I moved to Colorado when I was about 24, maybe 23. I started to understand how the earthquakes had been affecting me, and I started to understand all of those things and just kind of get that feeling of, yeah, I'm connected to all this stuff, but I don't know exactly why. So about 5 years ago, sorry, I'm like talking to the file manager in my head. So about 5-ish years ago, I had this very, very long dream about these circumstances, and this was like pre-pandemic stuff, right? The circumstances that I saw in this dream at the time were just so outlandish and made no sense in the context of my present life. So I just kind of dismissed it and thought, that was a weird dream. And then fast forward a few years later, all of a sudden I'm divorced. My husband's out of the house. I have I have someone delivering a barn in my backyard who I'm dating, and my uncle from Long Island is here for some reason, and I was about to have surgery. That was all in my dream. I thought at the time it was a dream. And uh, it was when the guy came to trim my tree to get the barn in the backyard, and I knew I had met him before, but I had never met him before. And I went, it's happening. This is the dream. And so what started happening, and that was 3 years ago, almost to the day. I had my surgery on September 6th. So after I figured that out and I saw that, and I kind of call them Easter eggs, because for me, they're like moments that glow, and it's not a deja vu. It is the experience of absolutely knowing you've lived it before. A lot of times, sometimes. I'm not sure if we, rehearse everything. I think it's mostly the most important or most challenging times, at least if you're someone who is in the department of collapsing timelines or being a macro processor. I think you rehearse different things to find the best potential outcome, the highest good for anything. And I'm going to put this out of my eyes, because if I were you watching this, I would be going, clip your fucking hair back. You're driving me bananas. And if either of you, my two patrons, were thinking that, you're probably laughing your ass off right now. But so the thing started happening, and I would have like these Easter egg moments, and then it just kept happening. And then it was when I broke up with that guy after the surgery, met a different person online, and then down the road, I had actual confirmation from an outside source that I wasn't crazy, and what I was perceiving did all happen, and that I did actually tell someone, because I met someone named Ferdinand, and I had told my youngest, who was presenting as a girl at the time, I had told my youngest about this dream because they were reading Ferdinand the Bull for school. And I thought, oh, I bet that's that silly end to the dream where I was kissing this other man in the backyard. That must be what that was about. So when I met the Ferdinand person, plus I'd had all these other experiences, like having some surgery that I had no idea why I would be having, I talked to my kid about it and said, do you remember me telling you about that crazy dream, yada yada? And it was interesting too, because for him that was sort of like a moment of clarity and validation and opening up his mind to the potential that there's more to the universe. I mean, you would think, being my kid, that they would have gotten more of that by now, but I never wanted to force it on them, just like I didn't want religion forced on them or anything either, because I wanted them to have their own choices and decide what they believed was true. I would tell them how I felt, what I personally believed, but I wasn't like putting them in training, meditating when they're 5 and teaching them how to throw things across the room with their mind. They did enough of that with their little kid hands. So he did remember, and the fact that so much of the dream had already happened that I had told him about, and he remembered that, and I had the confirmation of the name. So that was when everything kind of came together about 2.5 years ago, where I was like, okay, I am doing some kind of review or travel or something with time and timelines. And at the time, I did not, I believed in the concept of a multiverse and parallel lives and all of those kinds of potential theories, string theory, quantum physics, but I did not see it the way I do now. So I was still kind of thinking, all right, I had this preview of all this stuff because I'm going through these difficult times, but these are markers or Easter eggs to show me that I'm on the path and that I haven't, that I'm going in the right direction. These are things prompting me and easing me towards my greatest good and doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And also to give me like a sense of comfort because the end of the dream was very, very happy. And every time things happened that affirmed I was still on that timeline, that track, it made it easier for me to deal with whatever was happening in my life. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I have to pause it. I don't know if some jackass has a campfire going right now in their backyard because, the whole country's on fire. Why worry about that? And we do have extreme fire danger and they're not allowed to do it. But at any rate, there's a bunch of smoke being sucked in my house right now. And I think I have to turn that off before I can keep talking. Oh, that's better. And now I probably don't have to yell at you either. It's a good thing I stopped the other recording and then started a new one because then I can edit the sound differently. So, blah, 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 dream, kid, validation, hard times. All right. That brings us to December of last year. By that time, a lot of things had happened. Was broken up with Ferdinand for a year and a half and then reunited, and then now I'm in this weird limbo with that whole thing, but there is an actual person named Ferdinand. And what I learned between meeting him and now was that what I was seeing, what I was doing, what I was aware of, because it started happening in real time. Instead of having a dream in advance and then kind of getting that Easter egg kind of feeling, I became aware that we train in our sleep, the astral not training that I talk about in my podcast. We train in our sleep. We go wherever you want to call it. Some people think it's the Galactic Federation. Some people think it's, the liminal space in the astral. For me, it was always kind of like Star Trek-y with holodecks, where we're running these simulations and we would be, or watching TV screens, and we were analyzing and training for these missions, for these things we were going to need to do now. And so I don't think that, we did this for every moment of our lives necessarily. It's just the important stuff. And the most important stuff is happening, during this period of time from like 2012 to 2032. This is turning into a TikTok video. I've been interrupted so many times. Like one of those things where they keep changing the view and then go back to normal for no reason whatsoever. Don't worry if you do that. I think it's wonderful and I love it, but it's not so much my style when I'm talking long form here. Oh gosh. Teenagers, not for wimps. December. So by the time I had figured out that we are training for these missions or things that are really important, that we make the right choice. And not necessarily right choice, but best choice for the collective algorithm of time. Because there are multiple timelines, but part of what we're doing is we're integrating our fractalized consciousness. So like there's an infinite number of me, versions of me's being me all over the place, and I am going and collecting the parts of me that need to be here and integrating more and more of myself into me. And in that process, you are, some of us anyway, I don't know that everybody does this, but maybe we do it on an individual level, but I don't know that everybody does it on a collective level, kind of how Jess Reed talks about being a micro or a macro processor, and that both are equally important. Um, it just works a little differently, that's all. So it became apparent that I'm seeing timelines like all the time. I'm seeing timelines. I see them in real time. It's like um, I don't know. It's a little Groundhog Day feeling sometimes, um, because you'll be in a moment where it's going to be a difficult decision, and all of a sudden, um, you have a feeling about uh, what? Stop yelling at me. If there's something you want me to say, could we just all tune in a little better and not yell at me? Okay. I don't know if that ever happens to you guys, but if you ever get that, like, super loud sound, it doesn't always mean there's an emergency or there's something to address. It just means that for whatever reason, you're receiving it louder, and it's okay for you to say, hey, kind of like with any group of people or a group of kids or whatever, if everybody's all talking at once and yelling at each other at once, sometimes somebody will need to go, okay, I can't listen to all of you and answer all of you at the same time, so let's take turns. uh at any rate, we're constantly um doing this, and part of how it works for me is that I'll be in the moment, and it's like I see or have a perception of and access to, um, on like a super fast hyperloop of all the different things that I rehearsed and what the outcome of that was, and then being able to choose from a place of better understanding of um, the end game of each thing and how that was going to work and how they would go together, and how that could help me be in alignment with myself and also be fulfilling whatever the missions are that I'm supposed to do. So, by last October, November, December, I had that figured out, and I started seeing, and not just in my visions, but in my cards, my readings that I would be doing for the collective, a lot of volcanoes and explosions and bombings and extreme weather, and just kind of like, to a degree that was scary even to me, who doesn't scare easily in reality. I always feel like everything's going to be not as bad as we think it is, for the most part. Um, whether that's to my detriment or my benefit, I guess time will tell. Um, so I saw all this, and part of what I saw, and with that, I've been figuring out, and I figured out at that time, okay, I'm seeing these things and I'm being shown these things so that I'm aware that these are the points in time that need to be corrected or um, collectively, energetically worked on so that it turned out in the highest good. Not necessarily perfect, not necessarily bypassing or avoiding anything, but just the highest good. So I had that already going through my head from October, November, and then in December, right before Christmas, the volcanoes started going off, and I immediately was focusing more, I was doing the love expansion thing where I was projecting out my energy and growing my unconditional love field until it was large enough so that I could encompass the earth and I could hold the earth in embrace and she could hold me back. And that energy exchange with intention is a very powerful thing. And so I was just sending unconditional love and gratitude and communicating with the mother, our Mother Earth, and listening to her. And in that process, offering my assistance or help to make whatever her natural processes are that she was needing to go through easier. At the time, the prevailing opinion was kind of like, yeah, the earth is fine without us. We're just ants and we don't matter in that regard, and she'll just shake us off like a bad cold. And I had that thought too at times. And when I started doing that love expansion thing, it was like everything that had like every preconceived idea I had about our smallness changed. And I started to see that we could have a connection and we could support the crystalline grid. I just started understanding all of these concepts and putting these things together that I hadn't really been able to put together. And it was too soon for me to start talking to people about it because people didn't want to hear it. They were still all up in the Trump shit and they were, still trying to navigate scary COVID. And so the idea that, now we're supposed to take time out of our panicking lives to commune with the planet and whales and dolphins and chant in the bathtub so that you can hug the earth. They were not ready to hear that at the time. So I talked about it on my podcast and then didn't really try too hard to explain it publicly. Plus, I knew there was more that I needed to understand. And I was also going through, this wasn't a tower moment. This was like, I willfully, during the solar eclipse in December, and then on December 21st, that big conjunction last year, I pretty much offered myself up to the universe and was like, whatever is not needed, get rid of it. I want to be free of everything that is sucking. You know what I mean? Anything that no longer serves me, I am willing to accept however that comes. And since getting to know Serafina and collaborating with her on Meow Podcast, I have learned to say with ease and in a way that brings me joy instead of like Athena warrior princess, because that's a big archetype for me is Athena. Athena warrior princess charging in there like, I'll take them all on. I'll go fight 2 battles, damn it. So I was going through a bit, and then I also knew that there was just more that I needed to understand, and I learned more over time. But I saw that the volcanoes were happening, and I remembered the explosions, and so I was just honestly kind of spending most of the winter, because what else did I have to do anyway, listening to whales, chanting, meditating, communicating with aliens, and focusing on the timelines we wanted to be on. I'm focusing on those things that I saw so that I could take action when they came up. And so then there was that attempted bombing. I think it was on Christmas Day. It might have been on Christmas Eve, which caused a little bit of damage, and the man who was the bomber died, but it, was thwarted. It didn't go off. And that gave me encouragement to keep doing this. And so I just kept doing that. I just kept hanging out with Earth. And then I kept getting pointed into directions with things about the Schumann resonance and earthquakes, and just studying all of this stuff, paying attention to the solar cycles, noticing the patterns of how I feel during different times, and then also realizing, like, feeling a closer and closer connection with Gaia in a way that I knew, in a very short time, that she loves us and we are her children. And I got to thinking about that, and I was like, okay, she does not want to shake off her children like a bad cold. And as the ones most able to protect all life, like, that's part of our job, is to help. And so I have put together all of this stuff, and now I'm at this point where I know that we are supposed to intervene when we have foreknowledge or forewarning of things coming up, so that we can shift the timeline and collapse catastrophic timelines to protect life on Earth. This doesn't mean that the release of the pressure doesn't happen for the planet, because a lot of that isn't just Earth, having a meltdown. It's the cosmic rays hitting the planet and the solar radiation hitting the planet. So we are helping to protect the magnetosphere and the ionosphere with our energy, with that crystalline grid. So one of the things that I had seen, along with being told that we needed to have some extra food, just some of those preparedness things, but a little more than I had done in the past, because there could be supply chain issues, and that there would be a bad fire season, and that there would be shortages of things, and that, things were not going to just get back to normal like everybody thought, and that there would be roles for people to play doing this grid work, and that could be important and help. And so I had also been working on using that energy field, that love bubble, to get rid of the smoke in my valley, or bring rain to areas, which is, part of what I'll be working with you on. And so I knew that could work. But so I'd seen all that, and then one of the things that I saw was just like devastating weather. Like a blizzard that closed the interstate here in Colorado for not just for a few weeks, but like months, because there was so much snow and so because of that, like, we wound up being isolated, kind of, certainly from Denver, and in some ways from the rest of the world, and that a lot of people had that experience of having their communities being isolated, or devastation, catastrophe. And this storm, yeah, deep knowing, because it makes my makes my spleen feel weird. Can you feel nauseous in your spleen? I know that sounds strange, but it's just kind of like where I feel it. But what I saw, the potential for, and now I know that we're not done with hurricane season and everything, but I really feel like the people that have been drawn together whether they're aware of it or not, because some people are still doing the work unconsciously and aren't aware or aren't remembering it, or they just, because see, what used to happen to me is I would just sleep for like 12 hours and then wake up, but I would be sore as fuck, and just not feeling like, oh, I got 12 great hours of sleep. um so since I've been doing it more consciously, and as a regular practice of connecting with the earth, I'm not as wrecked afterwards. Um, so the hurricane, man, I saw this storm coming through like a giant friggin' tornado that was the shit end of the stick from Louisiana all the way, you know, through New York and Maine. Like just this swath of destruction across a large part of the US. And, so much disruption in the midst of all the other disruption and chaos. And, not like end times kind of stuff, but just like imagine the Katrina aftermath, but on a scale of like a third of the states in the US. And, everybody having to relocate and just so much stuff. So, that's why. And so, in the meantime, I've just been getting my game together, learning everything about the space weather, following it, paying attention. And I learned it all just in the nick of time to be ready when this hurricane was coming, to do those totally unexpected emergency impromptu Zoom sessions where I honestly had little idea of what I was going to say. But I knew it was still important that I do it. And so I did those the day before the hurricane. And then the day of the hurricane, my jackass neighbor, but he's like, you know how sometimes you have that guy that's just sort of like snarky, like, come on. He's that guy, I think, in my divine timing. Because usually when he wakes me up in a very rude and startling manner in some way in the morning, at 5 something a.m., there's a reason. But so since I was awake already, I found this guy that was live streaming, and I just kept up with the storm, and I would pay attention to what was going on, and then I would, you know, get into my meditative state and do the guy balancing and everything. And as I started listening to and tracking the storm, what I was doing was I was consciously connecting with the Gridworker Collective, those who are particularly tuned into these particular jobs, because there's a lot of different jobs. And even on individual projects, like for instance, this hurricane, managing this hurricane is a project. And so I'm like the project manager, and I know what everybody needs to do. Not because I, delegated it. I'm not like the boss or anything. It's just, it's my job to know what everybody needs to do and communicate that and help coordinate all of the pieces, just like a project manager does now here on Earth. And it's really funny because I was one at the last job I had before I became a mom and disabled. So as the hurricane, as I was monitoring it and listening and paying attention, I was continually focusing on different areas and setting intentions and calling in protection and communicating with the collective. And as the storm started moving through, miraculous survival was happening. The storm chaser that was working with this guy who is a climatologist and was a weather guy, but he couldn't deal with the network BS. And thank goodness, because he's doing a real public service. Because there's a lot of people who don't have cable anymore, and it's hard to get local news sometimes, and so they don't get the alerts and whatnot. But anyway, the storm chaser guy, he, at several points, he just was kind of dumbfounded and said, I'm in shock because I don't understand why this isn't worse. Like, I know there's 150-mile-per-hour winds and roofs are flying around, but this should be so much worse, you know? Like, there should be more flooding, or there should be more destruction, or they should be getting slant. It was almost like um, people were protected. Like, there was the beginning of the hurricane with Grand Isle, and the people survived on this island that was just like a kid with a sandcastle went and knocked it over. I'm sure you've seen some of the pictures. So I started focusing on two things. I started focusing on slowing down the rotation. So I knew that it was spinning counterclockwise. And so when I was laying here doing my love expansion and gathering the energy, I was physically moving my hands in the opposite direction and focusing on weakening the storm, taking the energy out of the storm. And that is what I was communicating to everybody else in the network, you know? And then also diverting it so that it would take a different path than it was about to. Because it actually, the track that it was on and what I had seen is that it wasn't just going to kind of like go across the bottom of Louisiana and then like up through New Orleans way and almost skip most of Louisiana. What I saw was that it hit New Orleans and then it just kind of kept going almost up to Kansas and then just right across the Midwest and through Missouri, just the whole area, like the whole third eastern portion of the United States. So the more I saw that things seemed to be working, the more I became aware of different people that I knew who had connected to me and or connected with me personally and were doing this work, also having these intentions and sending that energy to the earth. But I also saw, I could hear and see other people as well, who probably didn't even know that they were there and that they were participating, which was really cool. A lot of them were from the community that I think both of you are in with me. So I pretty much kind of did that all day, just like monitoring the storm, watching what was going on. When it got intense and it was in different areas, I was thinking about the most protection for the life that was there. And then we got to the part where it was going to hit New Orleans. And right about that time, and I will be sharing this link with him because we were down in the trenches together, actively, both of us in communication that we were doing this. So what I told him we needed to do was use our energy to build a light bridge with the crystalline grid and hold the levees. That we needed to hold the levees and weaken the storm. And no matter what, just hold the levees and protect life. Hold the levees and protect life. And I know they built the levees better and all of that, but they did hold. And even the engineers who built the shit were like, we're glad it worked, but man, they certainly should have broken because of the amount of force of storm surge. The Mississippi River was flowing the opposite direction. It was flowing backwards from the storm surge. That's some pretty intense water pressure. So, Gursev, my friend, he's kind of like, he's my friend, but he's like a son to me. And I think, I'm a bit like a mentor for him. But I also learn a lot from him too. So I'm not all about that hierarchy bullshit. We all have stuff to contribute. So, as I was, you know, linking up with him and all the other people, I saw he and I in particular doing this thing of unbraiding and rebraiding timelines. And it's like the timelines are like these long golden ropes almost, but like very made out of light. You know what I mean? So we're basically taking these beams of light and almost, braiding them together and unbraiding them like a double Dutch kind of thing. And so he's on one end and I'm on the other end, and we're taking out the catastrophe part and rebraiding back together the shit we want to keep, which is the levees holding and as many people being saved as possible. So then I became aware of more and more people, and I saw that there were people who were shielding groups of people in areas that were very highly damaged, or like people got flooded out and had to go up in their attics and everything, but most of them were rescued, which was amazing. And then others were working on other parts, and so all of us were working together to do this. And part of what was so scary about this storm, as I was watching it come in, it hit the first places, and then it looked like it might actually, not make direct landfall at New Orleans, and they would just get the outer edge. But it changed course and like went for that area. But as it made landfall initially, it was not weakening. It was staying just as strong. And so as it started to hit New Orleans, it just kept downgrading and downgrading. And like I was listening to the storm guy so I could keep up with what was going on, but I was fully in the trance state, in the astral, with Gursev and a lot of other people doing this work to take the piss out of this storm. We were taking the energy from this storm, but I had this experience that happened during the storm where I realized, and this is going to sound so goofy, but it's really what it was like, because it was like all of a sudden I realized we can eat the storm. We can eat the storm. We can absorb the energy. We can eat the storm. We can absorb the energy. We can take the energy out of the storm. We can weaken it. We can slow it down. And so it went from a borderline Cat 5, because it was like, 7 miles per hour away from being a Cat 5 when it made landfall, and stayed that way until it got to New Orleans. It went from that to a Cat 2 in something like an hour. And the weather guys and like all the people are like, wow, I have no idea why that happened, but super glad it did. And so, sorry about that. That was probably horrible sounding. So when I realized we could do that, like that's what I was doing, is I was like telling everybody that was all in communication astrally in this area, focusing our energy on this work, and working on holding the grid. And, um, and a lot of the way that life was preserved was by, um, helping them not to be in fear and afraid, so that they made dumb mistakes. Because a lot of times the reason people don't survive things is just because they're scared and they're not thinking straight, and they, have shit happen. Like that poor old man that an alligator attacked. Because, it's kind of like, you're in Louisiana, there's gators. You should probably just not and stay out of the water. But you start, not thinking clearly. So then the next day, whew, man, was I wiped. Like once it got down to a cat 2, I felt like I could go to sleep. And I knew the next day there was going to be still a lot of danger of tornadoes and flooding and things. And then probably more towards the end of the week, which there was back east, because it was going to kind of like rain its way across and then pick up steam again when it got closer to the ocean, to the Atlantic. So the next day I was really wiped, and I was super tired those 2 days, but not, and it was weird. It was sort of like, and this isn't the first time I felt this way, and I know I've heard other grid workers talk about it. Erin Shade, I'm pretty sure, I think it was her, one time she was talking about, yeah, you just literally shit yourself. Like, you shit out the world's misery. You shit it out. so my digestion was a little whack this week, and it really was like, man, I had Thanksgiving dinner. And so I feel like I'll be able to refine that process so that it's not so much. But I mean, that's part of why I'm doing this. That's part of why I started the Patreon. That's part of why I care so much about this and why I'm sharing this story, is because I have so much love and gratitude and belief in all those of you out there who have this planet-sized energy, and a lot of you don't even know it. I have so much gratitude for you, because I think part of the reason that I've been able to physically heal is because more and more people are consciously doing this work. So it doesn't take as much effort. It doesn't take as much downtime where I'm sleeping for days. Like in the past, what would have happened is I probably just would have been asleep from Friday to Wednesday, working on the storm. But I would have, been physically beat up, and not getting restored at all in my sleep. But once I learned how to expand out that love field and give that unconditional love to the earth and receive it back, and have that energy flowing from source through me to the earth and back, so that it's like this continual flow of energy, that's when my body started to physically heal from a lot of the damage over the years, and I started to have drastic improvements in my health and what I could do. So I really know that, especially based on this experience of bouncing back so quickly from, and I mean, even just the fact that I was watching a hurricane live stream for 13 hours and meditating is enough to make me tired, let alone, the concept of the enormity of that kind of energy work. To be taking a hurricane, which is spinning at 150 miles per hour, and this thing, like, they showed it in 3D, because they can do that now, and it was like 3 times taller. That it really was like a giant. As a matter of fact, the YouTube weather guy, he said it just looks like a giant tornado. I've never seen anything like it. And so taking all of that energy and managing it and dispersing it and absorbing it, go team grid work. uh, I know that more people will make the work easier for everyone. That is always a true equation. And it also makes it more effective. I believe that we have the ability to network with a lot of other people, even if we never necessarily connect with them in real life or online, but just in the astral, because I know just from probability that there's more people like me, more people like you out there doing this. But I know that the more people who do it together and in a focused way and consciously, and not just in our sleep and totally unaware of it, the easier it will be for everyone. And in fact, it will become healing for a lot of people who have been plagued by chronic illness or mental health battles. Or, and I'm not saying that this is a cure for anything, all right? I want to put, because I'm not, I don't like that ableist bullshit that the spiritual community likes to dish out, where if you aren't somehow physically perfect, that uh, you must not, I don't know, be spiritual enough or be right about anything else you're saying, you know? That we're all supposed to be this cookie cutter yoga Barbie, and if you're not, then you're not worth listening to. Um, I think those of us who have been doing this grid work have um, suffered a lot physically. And I think the older you are, the more true that is, because you've been doing it longer, you know? My first memory of astral travel that I have in this lifetime, I was about 4 years old, I think. And I I had this I had the experience of leaving my body, and I knew that was exactly what was happening. And I was kind of flying around space and checking things out and zipping here and there and thinking of different places on Earth, and then looking at stars and going, oh, I want to go see that one over there. And it was all happening very fast in my kid mind. Um, and then there was like a voice that was like, come here for a moment, child, come see me. And the next thing I knew, I had the very distinct feeling of being the head of an earth body. So like I had the sensation, like a physical sensation, um, where my body was the earth and then my head was me. And so I know that that was me making that connection with Gaia, but I didn't understand that at the time. I just knew that I left my body and then I was a planet. um, and then I told my grandma about it, and I'm sure she was doing the right thing, but she sort of bound me a little bit, uh, kind of like astrally grounded me, because I was so little, and I don't think she really had the um, everybody, like it, you were just a kid to adults back then, you know what I mean? You were always just a kid. And I don't think they thought that a kid would have the capacity to understand grounding and tethering and all of those sorts of concepts to keep themselves safe. So instead of empowering me, the only logical thing was to do some um, German Catholic Santeria psychic Rosicrucian holy water thing. And boy, my grandmother's spirituality could be a whole series on itself, but it was a wonderful, I got exposed to everything as a kid. But she grounded me. She made it so that I um, couldn't really leave my body like that for quite a while. Um, and it was probably the right thing to do because uh, I'm sure there were times where I might have wanted to leave and not come back. Whew. But I'm sure glad that I stayed. And I'm sure glad that I made it to this point in time and to sharing this story with you. I know there will be others who see it later on. Um, I'll keep it patron exclusive as long as I can, but at some point I should share it with the rest of the world. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you about it now in this very awkward, unpolished, raw, authentic way. Uh, so that when I do tell it again in the future, maybe I can do it more concisely. But um, this is why I'm so excited. And this is why I kicked my own ass getting my Patreon ready to launch on the 1st of September, because after I saw what happened with the hurricane, that was like miracle after miracle. And then that experience of being aware of all of these people in their astral state and working together. And the thing about it that was so cool, you guys, is I think we tend to see ourselves, and I know there's a lot of different people, and you know, the one we're all obsessed with, Jessa, talks about us being gods and being huge and be, but I think it's really difficult unless you get to witness each other to have a concept of just how huge we are. And what I mean, we were like, you know, it was like we were Transformers, you know, we were giant godlike light being versions of ourselves. And New Orleans, the bowl that is New Orleans and the levee system was just like a little pond that we were all playing at, because in relation to our size, it would have been like a small pond that you could walk around maybe. So you're all pretty damn amazing. And I'm excited to see what others start to experience and what others start to find. And if we can get to a point where we're all seeing, and maybe we don't see exactly the same visual of it, but that you're like, oh yeah, holy shit, there's Andrea and there's Gursev, and I'm going, oh, there's Trista and she can see me now, and wow, this is really awesome. Because if we can get to that point, I really believe we can do anything. We can do anything. We can affect a lot of change. So let's do this thing. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm going to edit this together. It's going to be the longest episode in history. I may make it 2 parts, which you won't hear because this is at the end. So I don't know why I'm still talking. Love you guys.